Good morning. Kathryn and I are very happy to be with you this morning and to share a presentation on shifting context with a focus on vision and commitment. We believe strongly that vision is what shapes our individual lives, our communities, and our country. And some examples of vision are Gandhi's Free India, Ability Paths Promote diversity, equity, and inclusion for those with disabilities, and Three Strands Global's vision of a world free from human trafficking. So this background to these stories is all in shifting context. And there's about 30 other stories there that tell how leaders are bringing about social change in the world. So you might be wondering why my co-authoress, Linda Alpin, and I wrote this book right now. It is the true stories of sheroes and heroes from around the world that demonstrate leadership from within brings about real social change. Shifting context is about bringing the invisible into the visible by looking behind the visions and looking at the actions of the leaders and the principles they followed in leadership. Linda Boy and I believe that everyone is a leader. That means that each one of you is a leader. Thus, we also wrote the book for you to be guided to develop your own personal and professional life. At the end of every chapter, there's between 3 and 5 questions, and when you answer them, do so for your life, and you will be able to expand your professional development and leadership. I want to acknowledge my co-author, Linda Alpin. She is on medical leave, and Dr. Gonde was very pleased to invite me. Thank you, Dr. Gonde. This presentation is 2 stories plus some exercises. And this morning, Kathryn Johnson will share her story of Kathryn is an board member of the International Leadership Association and a retired executive from Health Forum. And then I will read the story of Sandhya, a woman from India. Sandhya was not able to send us a video because she has COVID for the 2nd time. But that story will also share a very important vision. So my promise this morning is that by the end of our session, you will be interested in forming your own vision or revising a vision you already have. So how many of you, by show of hands, have a vision now, either personal or professional? Who would like to share one of their visions? Just call out. Siri?
Yeah, so going back in time, while I was in India, I was just thinking as to what would I like to achieve out of my master's program here. So I think that set the tone for my vision. So as a part of the vision, I came here envisioning that I will be able to make a pivot in my career and transition into a product manager role. So in short, that's my vision. And I think that helped me set my thinking straight as to what is it that I'm going to achieve, like whether it's in respect to pursuing project work or maybe it's in respect to, applying to jobs.
Thank you. That's a very good example of forming your vision and then taking the action to come to Arizona to study. I'll take one more example. Anybody else want to share their example? Anyone? Okay. So what's the difference between a dream and a vision? A dream is something that sounds exciting or enticing. And it's just that. So as a young child, I may have wanted to be a nurse. You may have wanted to be a firefighter or an astronaut. And the dream is just that. You don't take any action about it. If you turn that dream into a vision, you start to take action. So a vision stems from what you care about. So if you care about designing bridges so for countries that have a lot of rainfall, then that is going to motivate you to focus and take your actions. So let me share some of my examples of what I care about. I care about my education and professional development. So therefore, when I am making decisions, I take actions to further that. I take the action to further walking several miles a day, selecting my food carefully. When I'm looking at I think I mixed that up. With my professional development, I look at my education and my leadership training. With my food, and I look at my exercise and what I'm choosing to eat because I care about myself. And lastly, I look at my relationships and I make my decisions to be with friends and colleagues because relationships are important to me. So that's what you have to look at is what do you care about? And there's exercises in shifting context that will help you to determine what you care about. So the vision stems from your care and you take specific actions. A commitment is similar to a promise. It requires that action. And like your care, you can have several visions for your life and your profession. For example, Siri gave a very good example of where he wanted to come to India or come to Arizona to study so that he could become a product manager. So the vision helps you to achieve your goals in life. So let me further give you an example of my own here. What do I really care about? I care about shining my light so others might shine theirs. My vision is a world in which each individual experiences freedom. The freedom to be safe and to pursue his or her own visions on a personal and professional level. One of the ways I'm committed to do that is through education, writing, speaking, and conducting webinars. So I have taken what I care about is freedom, transferred it to my vision, and connected it to my actions of education, speaking, etc. So that's the flow from the care and the decisions to follow that, to the vision, to the actions. Are there any questions so far? That's very precise and concise. So if you have questions, just call them out. Anybody need to come off Zoom and ask any questions? Okay, so let me go and introduce Kathryn a little bit more. Kathryn devoted 25 years of her career to leading Health Forum, an organization that focused on turning illness to wellness. So I'm going to invite Kathryn now to share her story.
Thank you, Barbara, and it's great to be with you all this morning. What I want to talk about is my personal business experience in shifting contexts and how it revitalized my organization and helped us become more relevant and actually have a much greater impact on the field of healthcare and healthcare delivery. As I do that, I want to suggest to you, I understand your first and second year business students, that you might think a moment about the organizations that you've worked in and whether they have what I think are, in my opinion, essentials for all organizations. Do they have a vision statement, a purpose statement, a mission statement, a set of core values, a value proposition? And as some of you may be beginning to look for or think about career advancement, as you do different job interviews, I encourage you to look at all of those and look for organizations that have those squarely in mind. Some of the vision statements that I find both aspirational and inspirational are Feeding America, which says a hunger-free America, very simple, clear statement, or Oxfam, a world without poverty, a just world without poverty. I love Habitat for Humanities, a world where everyone has a decent place to live. At my role at the Health Forum, we were a national and international organization. We believed in disruptive innovation, and I'm sure you've studied that in your graduate work. But I think developing what I call a disruptive innovation mindset can move your organization from the middle of the road stance to a more visionary, forward-looking position. It also can represent, as it did in our case, a pretty big paradigm shift, which I'll get to in just a moment. But it had major implications when we created and developed a new vision for our board composition, for our staff training and development, for our customer base, for our products and services. So a vision can move you from one position to a very different position. The Health Forum refocused itself on this new vision in the 90s, and it was quite out of bounds for where the current healthcare thinking was. And it was a risky move. Our former vision at the forum was very simply to strengthen healthcare systems through leadership development. And our members were major health systems like Kaiser and Sutter Health, et cetera, University of Arizona, Tucson Medical Center, et cetera. We created a new vision, and that vision was to build healthier communities around the world. And in the 90s, when we made this switch, almost all of healthcare was focused on the individual patient. Almost all training of physicians and nurses and administrators was on the individual patient. And at that time, about 95% of all healthcare spending was focused on the sickness side, the illness side of the equation. Only 4%, less than 4% was spent on prevention and wellness. So we did this major pivot as a board and as the senior staff to help healthcare systems and their leadership create a focus in their own geographies on creating healthier communities. And it was, as I said, a big stretch from the current status quo. When we began our work, we used several thought leaders that you may have studied in your graduate work. Jim Collins, Good to Great, is a big believer in vision, and Jim was here at Stanford and helped us with our work. And Peter Singay at MIT, one of the leaders in systems thinking, also a big proponent of visioning. And there were 3 questions that we asked, and these are questions that you might ask yourself as you think about your own shifting context and your vision for your life and for your work. The first is, if you were widely successful in your organization, what would success look like? What would be different in the world? A world where everybody has a bed to sleep in, a house to sleep in, was, And the second question you might ask is, can we actually describe an end state for our vision? Again, what would be different? Can we describe that change in real terms? And then finally, how clear is our strategic intent? So what I love about the visioning part of strategy work is that it really sharpens your organizational focus on the impact you want to have, and very importantly, on the strategies that you'll use to actually implement that vision. So as we began to focus on this new end game of healthier communities, we had to make some fundamental paradigm shifts in the way we thought about our customers and their work. And some of those changes were that we had to develop a whole set of new relationships with WHO, the CDC, public health associations, school systems, et cetera, because we were interested in all of the, what they call population health or social determinants of health variables. And what creates health is poverty levels, education levels, the business environment, the environmental impact of healthy food and healthy water, the civil society. So to get to population health, to get to this new vision, we had to create these new partnerships, and we had to study what were the tipping points in innovation. So to talk just a second about disruptive innovation, In the work on tipping points, as you may know, if you can get 10 to 15% of the industry to make the shift, the rest of the industry will follow. So you can work with those who are the innovators in moving a tipping point. And that's what we try to do, is really support the innovators who wanted to move to this Healthier Communities vision. So we turned our annual meeting into a Healthy Communities Summit. We created a Healthy Communities Fellowship, a one-year learning experience. We created a Healthy Communities Award that was offered globally, that we gave out at our summit. We pushed our journal to focus on healthy communities. We created these new partnerships I've referred to. We brought board members in, the head of the National Civic League and other groups like that, to our organization. And we were the leader in bringing environmental issues. Healthcare is notoriously a bad environmental player, into looking at the environmental role that they played in their communities. In most communities, the healthcare system is the second or largest employer. So how they treat their employees was very key. We created community dashboards. We had a repository of best practices and case studies. And we really began to tout that this shift could happen from individual illness care to wellness care. Today, as you think about your own organizations, I encourage you to think about the impact your organization's having, both on sustainable business practices and on your communities. And with this focus on the new end game, you have a better chance of not regressing to the mean, but actually achieving new heights. Leaders today, I believe, need to execute perfectly in today's world while they're simultaneously innovating and creating a better future for their organizations and hopefully for our society. I always like the definition of the leader's role as being to manage the tension between today's reality and the promise of tomorrow and the uncertainty that that holds. So in summary, I believe the idea of shifting context is vital for all organizations and remains relevant to them stretching themselves to achieve these new heights. It's a great opportunity for you as an individual today to think about how you may want to reinvent yourself and reinvent the organizations that you're part of. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathryn. That's a very good example of where Health Forum identified what they cared about, formed a vision, and then took very specific actions. There is a question in the chat, Kathryn.
Yes.
The question is, what year was it that you made this change? It seems you were some of the earlier adopters of social determinants of healthy and impressive.
Yes, we made the change in the early 1990s. And we were early on, and WHO was just really getting into their work in healthier communities, and we partnered with them. The Canadians were ahead of the Americans. We did a lot of work with the Canadians. So you go out when you make this kind of shift and you say, well, who are the innovators? Who are the lead players out there, and how can you bring them and their experience to fore?
That story that Kathryn just shared is also a story of a vision that shifted a country. At the beginning, I said that vision can shift your life, your community, and your country. So it shifted the life of the employees and the country for healthcare. Thank you.
Yeah, social determinants of health. I asked that question because right now it's a very important part of a lot of research proposals. So we're very early. It's awesome.
Medical schools now, for the first time in the last 10 years, are now focusing much more on community and population health, the social determinants. They're absolutely critical, and we're investing very little in that compared to the other parts of the equation.
Okay, so now I want to share Sandhya's story. Can visions such as Gandhi's Free India have changed millions of lives? Can only grand visions change lives? Absolutely not. Is there a role for vision in our personal, everyday, professional life? Absolutely. Vision creates reality. Sandhya is a woman who lives in Kadpa in the south central part of India. It's a fascinating country on so many levels: historical, religious, and ecologically diverse, but it does have its downside. An estimated 6.8 million fewer female births will be recorded across India by 2030 because of the persistent use of selective abortions. With new technologies such as ultrasound, many baby girls are aborted and others are left to die after birth. So let's explore the power of Sandhya's vision when it is connected to what she cares about. And her story is called 1 Million More Babies to Loving Homes. About 20 years ago, Sandhya started taking in unwanted, abandoned children because they touched her heart. Her American nieces had raised $501 and sent it to her. From that start, Arti Home was born, named for her niece who died during the home's first years. One thing that Arti Home taught Sandhya is that 90% of India's abandoned children are girls. In 2007, as president of Arti Homes, Sandhya attended the Women Leaders for the World program in the United States. She wanted to double the size of her orphanage. As she attended the classes and walked the beautiful trails of the California foothills, she connected more deeply with her passion. She now saw possibilities beyond her orphanage. She fashioned a vision to have 1 million girls go home from the hospital to loving families. With this vision in mind, she began taking new actions when she returned home. She broadened her work to address the underlying gender discrimination and violence affecting both women and girls. She enlisted gynecologists to not reveal the sex of babies shown in various tests. She counseled women to deliver their babies before deciding to give them up for adoption. Today, her work aims to help women achieve economic and emotional independence, gain confidence, and understand their personal rights. What has her vision coupled with her energy and compassion accomplished? More than 30,000 women have been trained in leadership, a vocation, or employable skills. Her 3-month intensive vocational training programs have been attended by more than 20,000 formerly destitute women. The female to male ratio has improved slightly in the last few years. Sandhya is not a lone example of the power of vision. Like Kathryn's, Sandhya's vision is affecting individuals, is affecting communities, and the countries. So it goes back to saying that when a personal vision may not affect millions of people, but millions of like-minded visions, when considered collectively, have a major impact. I'd like to take just a minute now and have you either type into your computer or write on paper 1 or 2 things that you care about in your life. I've given you some examples, and then where we're going with this exercise is you're going to draft a vision for yourself. So write down 1 or 2 things that you care about for your life. Thank you. So keeping in mind what you've written down, now write yourself a vision. Any 2 or 3 declarative sentences. Don't worry about wordsmithing. Just write down what you're feeling and hearing. Now take and examine your cares and see if your cares are reflected in your vision. I see some of you nodding your heads. That's good. Now write your commitment to take 1 or 2 actions. So we've gone from our cares to our visions to taking action. And now I'm open for some examples. So I'll just let you call out. There's only 17 of us here in total. Who would like to go off of mute and share an example?
I wrote two examples because I wasn't 100% sure if I was capturing them correctly. So I did one that was like more personal and then like related to my personal life, and then one more kind of work related.
Why don't you share both of them one at a time?
Okay, so one vision I have is building a family of my own. And so I wrote as like a step to that is just being open to getting to know people in a relationship manner.
Mhm.
And then the other one is I have a vision to work internationally, improving public health. And so I feel like I'm already kind of working towards this one. So that's why I wasn't sure if it counted as a vision or not. But just looking for positions or looking for work in a more international space instead of a kind of domestic space.
I congratulate you on both. They're very nicely written. Thank you. And just make sure in the one on the international, maybe you can start to zero in on 2 or 3 different things to look at in detail and then decide if you want to pursue them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who else would like to share? Sure.
I wrote one which is more about my professional life. So most of it is actually coming from my past experiences and from the mistakes that I've made previously. So their impact, and the other one is a sense of accomplishment. I think they go both hand in hand. So it is to drive a positive impact in the life of people I work with, leading to a sense of accomplishment at the workplace.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one leads to the other, so they just tie together for me.
And what is an action you're going to take there?
I haven't come up with it yet.
Okay, so take a moment and come up with an action, because it's very good to have the vision, but then you can start to work on it. So what I want to do is ask you, what questions do you have now that either Kathryn or I can answer?
I had a question. So speaking of the vision statements, so when you are like working with a company that's got a vision statement, do you come across companies that have a very broad vision? And do you agree with like companies having such broad visions, like, it just spans across areas they work in?
It depends on the size of the company. If the company is quite large, I would say they may have an expansive vision, but then within each area, either geographical location or within departments, it would be advisable that they have their own vision. And maybe a team will have theirs. I've worked in teams, and the first thing we do is to form a vision and agree that all of us are committed to that vision. So that's the important part. If it gets too broad, it's hard to have everyone's commitment to it. Kathryn, did you have anything to add?
I happen to be working with the International Leadership Association board right now on a new vision statement, and we're looking at something like preparing leaders for a just and sustainable world. And the idea here is to get the sustainability issue, and the purpose statement also has that in it. I think that what's important in a vision statement is that it's something that you believe in, that you could stand for it. And many organizations only have PR statements versus something that actually plays itself out throughout the organization. So there's sometimes some glossy vision statements that don't really have much behind them. And that's the trick, holding your feet to the fire and really supporting the longer term vision.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other questions?
I will tell you that a good visioning exercise, as Barbara was just describing, can be hugely energizing for an organization to really look at where they are today versus where they would like to be. It's a very good way to then reevaluate your strategies, your tactics, your HR policies, everything based upon whether you're actually moving toward a clear vision. And most organizations spend way too much time on operational realities and very little time on longer term strategies, in my experience. And so I tried to flip that and ensure that at least half of my board's time was spent on strategy dialogue, because that's where you, I think, get the most out of your governance. Yes.
So my question is, so whenever you do a strategic planning exercise or whatever, there are these mission statements, visions, and all this. So you have exercises in your book and everything. How is this different from everything else that is out there? Or is it based on it? Or can you explain how you got to that in comparison to what else is out there? In terms of how to create your vision, and how did you come up with this? And is it based on other work, or is it totally new, or how did you come to it?
Well, we certainly based some of it on other work and other researchers, but it's being very practical. So we actually took the stories, interviewed the women, took their stories, and wrote their stories from that. But when they were taking the transformational leadership training several years ago, in some cases, it was important that when they came to us, they had that idea of something they wanted to do. Now, some changed it completely and took on a new idea, and some enlarged it like Sandhya did. But we're not following a real traditional path because there's such variation of, you have to have a strategic plan, you have to have a mission statement, you have to do this. Each organization needs to figure that out for themselves. But what is really important is the vision to start with. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. So how would you say people should use this book? Because like you say,
how would you say they use it?
Yes. Like,
well, I
through every chapter, or what's your suggestion?
Yeah, the book is divided into 6 sections. Okay, and so I can name 1 or 2 sections to you. One of them is what do you care about? One is your vision and commitment. One is belonging and building. And if you go to those sections, it is ideal to go from beginning to end because you'll get the continuity, but that's not necessary. You can go to those stories in a section and get the leadership principles that will help you. And at the end of every chapter, there's questions. So if you reflect on the chapter and answer the questions as they apply to your life, then that will help you to develop your leadership.
Thank you. I have another question for Kathryn. So do you have to convince people that it's important to act upon their vision? Because like you say, like sometimes it's one big PR exercise. What if there is a disconnect? What do you do? Or does it, I mean, to me it matters, but.
It's a good question. I think that you have to keep it very visible. So in the front of every board notebook, every session that we started, everything we did, we began with the vision, and it was our touchstone. And so if you don't have it visible, and if people aren't talking about it, and then you have to use it as a screen. So when you're introducing new programs, taking new risks, products and services, you say, well, does it match the vision? And it takes you down some very interesting pathways. And it certainly was a great exercise for us to sort of stop doing things the way we'd always done them and say, well, what will really advance this vision? So I think the organizations in Jim Collins' work and the Good to Great work were most successful, the ones that were really vision driven. But there are a lot of organizations out there that operate very day to day, as you know.
If some of them write a vision just so they have it. It's like it's something they can check off in a box. I work in teams where we keep that vision. So at the beginning of every team meeting, we have the vision read to us, and each time we take a different person. I belong to a church where every Sunday the vision statement is read, and we talk about how we've applied it in the last week.
That's great. Good examples.
Okay. Other questions, Doug? Anyone? Okay, so before we go to the questions and the book raffle, I want to go over the conclusions here. So we've talked about the concepts of vision and dream and commitment. Now what I want to do is leave you with some practices that you will have that you can continue to use as you go along day by day. And that's what the book also does. It leaves you with specific practices that you can refer to and build upon. So the first one is identify your cares and know your cares may change. They will change as you graduate. They will change as your age changes if you start to raise a family. And then from that, form a vision statement that you keep in front of you. Kathryn didn't note it today, but I think in her book, she calls that vision statement the North Star. Then finally choose your vision, speak your vision broadly and to everyone you can get that will listen. And the important part of doing that is the more people that you can speak it to, the more interest you're spreading, and the more conversations you can have to get ideas about how you can take that vision to yourself or the world. And then it takes commitment to be in consistent action. And that's really important. We all know the idea, oh, we'll exercise and then it doesn't happen. So I've given you examples from my personal life of where I am committed to taking actions. Kathryn has given you examples of building into the board meetings the time spent on vision. And finally, believe in yourself and your ability to fulfill your visions. There's people in the book very often doubted themselves, but they knew that if they had a support network and they worked persistently, they would achieve what they wanted. Maybe not in the first direction that they thought, but the road winds and with it you go. Anything else you want to ask about vision and commitment to either Kathryn or myself?
I had a question. So Kathryn, you just said you're working on a new vision statement for your org. So can you highlight a few activities that you normally do with the team in order to come up with the vision statement?
This is a board I'm on. I'm happy to do that. And it's called the International Leadership Association. It's made up of teachers of leadership in business schools and people who study leadership, researchers, as well as practitioners. And so it's a truly global group, number one. Number two, they've had the head of the Institute of Sustainability, University of Cambridge, has been leading us in a purpose exercise, and I've been leading in the vision exercise. So we're trying to get the purpose, which many organizations are now doing, and that is linked to the sustainability efforts of your organization. And so we've had, because we're global and haven't been able to meet very much face-to-face, we've had a whole series of calls on purpose and vision. And then we had a face-to-face meeting in DC in late March. And as a result of that, we have now down to 4 purpose and 4 vision statements, and we're still refining those. And then we're going to take them out to stakeholders, to keep committees and groups beyond the board for their review and comment. And we hope to have a final one to convey at the annual meeting actually in Washington, DC in October. So it's a process. It's highly iterative.
Sure. Thank you.
And by the way, we're reviewing the vision and purpose at the same time we look at the mission statement, our values, and our value proposition. And all of those should be aligned.
Yeah, it sounds quite like the process.
It's really forward-looking strategic thinking for an organization, something that most of us are not as well schooled in or comfortable doing as we should be, and yet I think can really advance and speed up the level of innovation and change in an organization. Disruptive in all the best ways.
I don't think there's any real set way of doing the vision. Each organization will have their own, or each team will, but I encourage you to be expansive in your thinking when you're doing it, and to really know that the first 2 or 3 times might not be the vision you want. Kathryn just said they've been working on it for a while. Now they've got it down to 4 possible vision statements. So it's a process of bringing it down.
One of the other things that we did at the forum is we invited 22 associations like the American Medical Association, the American Manufacturers, AARP, to come together and to look at what their visions were for the future of healthcare. And of that group, 60% of the 22 changed their visions, went back to their boards to incorporate healthy communities. So that was one of our impact statements that led us to believe we were making a difference. But even getting the dialogue going among other groups, getting healthcare systems to begin to look at that. So you may know the Kaiser Health System, for instance, has Thrive as their kind of key tagline. But that's part of a vision statement, that they know they have roles that are greater than just patient care as major employers and community citizens.
Thank you. So in the book, I encourage you to read the stories that are appropriate to you as you're working through your life and work, and to share them with others, and really look at the underlying leadership principles that these leaders are using. And they may seem very different than the way some people do it in a set pattern, but remember, transformation is about seeing the world in a different way. Sandhya thought she was going to enlarge her orphanage and double it, and then she realized that she could expand and help women in many other ways.